The global release of Girls Frontline 2 is finally right around the corner, and I was able to play the game recently as part of the global closed beta test. It's hard for me to get excited for new gacha game releases with just how many mediocre titles are constantly coming out, but let's just say that this one has exceeded my expectations on nearly all fronts. For the gacha genre, this game is truly doing something unique, and it's doing it really well in my opinion. While I did play Girls Frontline NeuroCloud for a bit at its release, I've never experienced the original Girls Frontline or any XCOM-lite games, so I'm really approaching this one from a fresh perspective, and so far the game has a lot of potential. In this video, I'll be going through the most important aspects of the game so that you can hopefully decide whether it is worth checking out for yourself. This is also a title I'm going to be covering leading up to and after the launch, so if you want to see more Girls Frontline 2 content, consider subscribing to the channel. With that, let's jump right in. Girls Frontline 2 is a tactical turn-based RPG with 2D gameplay and 3D character models, and for those familiar with the XCOM franchise, the gameplay can be described as somewhat of an XCOM-like. This game has a post-apocalyptic aesthetic with realistic atmospheres and takes place in Eastern Europe in the year 2074, 12 years after the start of the original title, although the devs have come out and stated that the story can be enjoyed independent of the original game. This story follows the commander of a now defunct private military company as he leads tactical dolls through a series of missions. The game is developed by Sunborn and is being published by either Sunborn or Howplay, depending on where you live in the world, which is kind of cringe, but it is what it is. The game should be releasing right around December 3rd. Girls Frontline 2 wastes no time getting you into combat, and I think that combat is where this game truly shines. As mentioned, gameplay is turn-based, with each member of your party performing their turn one at a time before the enemy team does the same. Characters, or tactical dolls as the game calls them, are able to move a certain number of tiles per turn, defined by their action points, and execute one of 4 available skills. Doll and enemy placement will affect the amount of damage that is dealt by a given attack. When units have a non-zero defense symbol next to them, referred to as your stability index, they're going to take 60% less damage, and cover is going to reduce this by an additional 25 to 35%. Enemies in the open will take 100% of incoming damage, therefore placement can play a massive role in the outcome of the fight. Story stages generally require you to kill all enemies within a certain number of turns and without losing any units in order to obtain max stars. Other objectives can also be present to spice up the gameplay. Tactical dolls each have 4 active skills and 1 passive ability. Active skills may utilize skill points or require a certain number of turns of cooldown. Enemies have similar mechanics, and there are a large number of unique enemy types in this game. Elite enemies, much like the dolls, have multiple active and passive skills along with movement mechanics. Other enemies may only have a single active skill, but have passive skills that can cause the enemy to launch an off-turn attack or detonate upon death, as some examples. As you progress through the story, stages become more complex by introducing things such as platforms and the ability to climb structures, conveyors, elevating cover, and lifts, as well as new enemy mechanics like action marks indicating enemy priorities and enemy alerts when being approached. While still in early game, I can say that the stage design feels quite fun, despite most early stages being easily cleared in auto. It's worth noting that stages can be run in 3x speed. There's an auto function really early on, and a playback feature which allows you to go back and redo already completed turns. It is a pretty awesome feature overall, allowing you to save time without having to reset the stage entirely. Being the based gacha game that Girls Frontline 2 is, all playable characters in this one are going to be female. Character models have some of, if not the best textures of any models that I've seen in a gacha game, but that said, character designs in my opinion do feel a bit samey and kind of plain and don't carry the same uniqueness as characters in, for example, Nikki or Wuthering Waves. Dolls are going to fit into one of 4 archetypes. Bulwark, which are your tank type class with high survivability, plus buffs and counterattacks. Vanguards, which have high mobility and burst damage. Supports that can provide buffs, healing, skill points, and other support stuff. And Sentinels, which are your main damage dealers. Some skills can deal elemental damage, and both enemies and dolls are weak to one or more elements. As far as weapons go, dolls can equip one of 7 weapon types: snipers, shotguns, assault rifles, submachine guns, machine guns, blades, and handguns. Each weapon uses a specific type of ammo, and both dolls and enemies are weak to one or more ammo types. Like any good RPG, there are a few systems for increasing your character's stats. First, you have your standard character level and weapon level. Second, dolls have something referred to as a neural helix, which is functionally a skill tree. Your skill tree gives stats and something referred to as keys, which are equipped to provide additional passives and give you some control over your playstyle. 6 keys can be equipped on any character, 3 fixed keys, and 3 common keys. Fixed keys come from your neural helix progression and are doll specific, while common keys are universal and obtained from maxing out the neural helix of characters. Third are your weapon attachments. These are effectively your gear and what you're going to spend most of your time farming at endgame. This is where RNG comes in. Weapon attachments come with stats and set effects when equipping 3 pieces from the same set. You can install 4 types of attachments per weapon. Barrels are going to have 4 substats, and all the other types are going to have 3. I feel like the game is actually pretty friendly when it comes to farming these items compared to the crazy RNG and some other gachas, although I'll have to see how this really plays out after the full release. You can target farm attachments from a pool of 2 different weapons and guarantee the set effect. Attachments can also be rerolled indefinitely, but this will not change the base stat, for example crit rate, or the initial rolls. Attachments can only be upgraded up to 200% of their base stats, so the initial rolls do play a pretty big factor. You can choose to accept or drop attachment rerolls, which is a cool feature, but you're going to use the materials required to do so either way. When you hit level 45, you can use precision boost chips to further increase these stats. These are a more rare material obtained from your weeklies, so I'm thinking that these should be used pretty wisely. We just talked about the major progression paths for each character, but it wouldn't be a gacha game without a dupe system. You can activate a total of 6 dupes, increasing a doll's fortification level by cashing in 30 shards. You get shards by recruiting a dupe in the gacha. As of now, there are some ways to collect shards outside of the gacha system. For example, Sabrina shards can be purchased from the boss fight shop, and I would expect some other ways to acquire shards in the future. Okay, I've yapped enough about progression systems, so let's talk about exactly what the gameplay modes in Girls Frontline 2 are like. Well, of course, we have our standard campaign where we get to interact with the main story. Campaign has both normal and hard modes, and stages consist of normal stages, story stages, elite battles, and boss fights, and offer a good variety overall. Next, we've got our main farming stages where we're going to burn stamina to farm doll and weapon upgrade materials, weapon attachments, and neural helix upgrades. There's actually a pretty good amount of progression here with levels of increasing difficulty, which definitely feels good during the early game. These can be run in auto after clearing with full stars up to a total of 10 times at once. This occurs instantly. You're not waiting for the battles to finish in the background, so you can burn an entire day's stamina in under a minute. Finally, we've got our endgame type modes referred to as combat simulations. First up, we've got Boss Fight. The Boss Fight game mode has a weekly reset with 3 attempts per week. This mode has 8 difficulty tiers, which should provide some long-term progression. Rewards include premium currency and shop currency, and your income is based on your weekly score. The shop currency can be used to buy character shards, summons, upgrade materials, and weapon attachments. Next, we've got our combat exercises, which is a PvP game mode. This mode also has a weekly settlement with increasing rewards for higher ranks, as well as one-time rewards for rank ups. Rewards include premium currency and gold, and you're going to get 3 attempts per day. This mode can actually be ran in manual, which isn't always common in gachas, so overall I'm looking forward to this one a lot. Before moving on, I do want to clarify that pull currency for both of these game modes is super free to play or casual friendly. The difference between bottom and top ranks is only about 1 pull, so there's not a lot to stress for here in my opinion. There's another PvP mode called Military Simulation, which I didn't unlock in the CBT, but requires achieving a certain high rank in combat exercise to access. Next, we've got 2 Tower or Abyss type game modes with a number of stages of increasing difficulty. Peak Value Assessment gives points for capturing and maintaining control of certain areas on the map, while Expansion Drills seem to simply be a series of kind of standard stages of increasing difficulty. This is a good way to farm weapon attachments without using stamina. Expansion Drills are the only mode that resets less often than weekly, although it's not clear how often this does happen in the CBT. This one gives a good amount of premium currency, but is also a way of farming boost chips for further enhancing weapon attachment stats. We just talked about quite a few game modes with weekly resets, so I would like to state that there are not weekly missions like some other gachas have. Girls Frontline is just going to have dailies, which are super easy to complete by just logging in and kind of doing the bare minimum. The other 2 modes we haven't talked about anywhere else are the dorm system and dispatch room. Besides being your kind of cringe dating sim mode, the dorm system is where you give the dolls gifts, which grants stats that can't be gained anywhere else. And finally, dispatch room is exactly what it sounds like with passive material farming. Let's look at the gacha system before wrapping up with my final thoughts. The gacha in this one is kind of rough and takes clear inspiration from our favorite Hoyoverse gacha. In the CBT, we only had 2 banners to summon on, a beginner banner and a standard banner. The game has a one-time beginner procurement banner with a guaranteed elite doll at 50 pulls and 20% discount on each 10 pull. Pulling on this one is a no-brainer in my opinion. Aside from the 50 pull guarantee, rates are the same as the standard banner without the ability to pull elite weapons, so we'll just take a look at those instead. The standard procurement banner gives a guaranteed elite doll or weapon at 80 pulls, with the probability starting to increase after 58 pulls. You've got a 0.6% probability of elite dolls and weapons, and a 6% probability for standard dolls and weapons. These are pretty low, but most of us are kind of used to similar rates by now. Every 10 pull guarantees a standard doll or weapon, and we've got a character selector at 260 pulls. There weren't any limited banners in the CBT, but from the Chinese server, we do know that the limited character banner has 80 pity and a 50-50, and the limited weapon banner has 70 pity and a 75-25. You're guaranteed to get the rate up character or weapon the second time around if you do miss out the first time. Interestingly, you can dismantle weapons you don't want and exchange the materials for pulls and elite weapons in the shop, which is a really nice feature that I'd love to see more of. Dismantling purple weapons gives 18 out of the 30 currency needed to cash in for either a standard or premium pull, which is really awesome in my opinion. All right, let's wrap this up with my final thoughts. This is a game that I'm personally going to play on day 1 and plan to stick with. I've been following this game for years now, and with this as my first time playing it, I can say that it certainly did not disappoint. Some of the highlights from playing the test included the ability to use 120 FPS, a PC client with Steam release, really good graphics with a kind of unique style, almost like an improved Snowbreak, an easy to navigate UI with things like character stats being very accessible in your battle mode, quick stamina usage at endgame, and just really satisfying and unique gameplay for a gacha. My biggest gripes at this time is really just that character designs feel pretty samey to me, and really only a couple of the characters caught my eye. I hope the devs don't plan to fix this with paid skins exclusively, because we've seen some pretty spicy ones. And if skin prices are anything like other games, we can probably expect them to be around $30 a pop. I purposely skip story when I'm going through CBTs to not spoil myself, but I will say that these games are heavily carried by events and story in my opinion, so I'll be very curious how the devs roll out these updates and if the events can stack up to something like Nikki. If so, this will likely be a title that can keep me around for quite some time. Well, that's all I've got for this one. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more Girls Frontline content and gacha gaming content in general, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you all soon for the next one. Peace.